Welcome to another bar walkthrough video from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, we are going to be going over bar area 3. This is section B. This is an application topic. Prepare worksheets to convert the governmental fund financial statements to the governmental activities reported in the government-wide financial statements. And we're going to be doing that the SuperfastCPA way, which is diving straight into the questions to learn the material. Now, if you don't know much about our strategies, make sure you go to SuperfastCPA.com and check out our free 1-hour webinar training. In that 1 hour, we will teach you for free the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And then after that, you're probably going to want to learn more, so make sure you also check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member, or buying our study materials, or buying the total bundle, which includes both the Pro course and the study materials. And one thing that will be included with the study materials, it's currently included with the Pro course, but we will change that in the future to where it's included with the study materials, is the full versions of these videos. On YouTube, what you're watching right now, we will only have 5 questions that we are going to go through. But for people who have purchased the study materials for the specific exam, like BAR, they will have access to the full 10 question versions of these videos so that they can get a little bit more help and a little bit more understanding. So make sure you check out becoming a member of SuperfastCPA and buying the study bundles, or of course the total bundle, because you'll be able to get access to these full versions of the videos so that you can get a little bit more help and understanding. Now, with all that said, let's dive straight into the first question. All right, here we are at question 1. Let's just dive straight in. One thing I always like to point out when it's an option is you want to read the last sentence of the question first. This is frequently the actual question, and it gives you context for what you're dealing with or what you're supposed to be looking for. So always do that. It's a very good exam day habit. So let's go through this. Which worksheet entry should Green Valley Township prepare to convert its transaction to the governmental activities column of the government-wide financial statements? Okay, let's go up to the top. So we're converting to the governmental activities column. During year 1, Green Valley Township's general fund purchased a new fire truck for $240,000. The purchase was reported as a capital outlay expenditure in the governmental fund financial statements. The fire truck has a 12-year useful life and no salvage value. Green Valley uses straight-line depreciation. So again, what is the entry going to be so that we can convert this transaction to the governmental activities column in the government-wide financial statements? Are we going to debit outlay expenditures and credit capital assets, debit accumulated depreciation and credit depreciation expense? Or are we going to be doing a different mixture, which you can see in these other options? Now, if you have no idea what this is even talking about, that's okay. We are using these questions to learn. We're going to learn how to, or what the worksheet transaction is, or the worksheet entry is, to be able to do something like this. So if you have an idea and you want to try it, maybe pause the video and give this a guess. But when you're ready, come back, we'll look at the answer together and start kind of trying to figure this out. All right, here we are. The answer is B. You would debit capital assets for $240,000, credit capital outlay expenditures for $240,000, debit depreciation expense for $20,000, and credit accumulated depreciation for $20,000. So let's dive into this to kind of understand what's even going on here. Governmental funds report purchases of general capital assets as capital outlay expenditures because they focus on current financial resources, as in the governmental funds do. However, governmental activities use the economic resources measurement focus, so the fire truck should be reported as a capital asset instead of being treated as a current period expenditure. So let's kind of go through that and make sure that we understand what that's even talking about. Governmental funds use the current financial resources focus, which means they mainly show the resources available soon to pay current bills. Governmental activities use the economic resources measurement focus, which means they show the government's bigger financial picture, including long-term assets and long-term liabilities. That is why government funds do not report things like capital assets and long-term debt the same way governmental activities do. So governmental funds, they're just reporting it as a full-on expenditure, the full $240,000. But the governmental activities would report it kind of how we would normally think about it, as an asset that is going to be depreciated. The worksheet entry removes the $240,000 capital outlay expenditure and records the fire truck as a capital asset. Because governmental activities also report depreciation, the township records depreciation expense of $20,000 calculated as the $240,000 divided by the 12 years. So we're learning there that they are going to remove the $240,000 capital outlay, and instead they're going to be recording the depreciation of $20,000 each year. So we're kind of learning some of the differences between the governmental funds and the governmental activities. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 2. Again, read the last sentence first. which worksheet entry should Silver Creek City prepare to convert the principal portion of the debt service payment to the governmental activities column? Let's go up to the top. During year 1, Silver Creek City issued long-term debt for governmental activities. At year end, the city made a $45,000 debt service payment from the general fund. Of that amount, $32,000 was for principal and $13,000 was for interest due at year end. The full $45,000 was reported as a debt service expenditure in the governmental fund financial statements. So again, what worksheet entry are they going to prepare to convert the principal portion of that debt to a debt service payment in the governmental activities column? Now, this is a little bit different than what we just looked at, but try to remember the focuses that these different funds have. Again, the governmental funds has a financial resources measurement focus, whereas the governmental activities has an economic resources financial focus. And if you don't remember, that's okay. We just talked about it in the previous question, but we're going to kind of be hitting that a little bit more throughout this video. But if you want to kind of give this a guess to think about what you think the right answer is, that's great. If not, again, we are using these questions to learn, so let's dive straight into the answer. All right, here we are. The answer is B. You would debit non-current debt of $32,000 and credit principal payments on debt of $32,000. So let's go through this. Governmental funds report debt service payments as expenditures because they focus on current financial resources. Again, we went over that in the previous question. However, in governmental activities, the principal portion of a debt repayment is not an expense. It reduces the related long-term liability. The worksheet entry removes the principal payment from expenditures and records the reduction of non-current debt. The interest portion is different because interest due at year end is properly reported as interest expense in governmental activities. So again, governmental funds, they're having the whole thing as an expenditure, including the principal and the interest expense. But underneath the governmental activities, they are not going to have the principal be an expenditure or an expense. That's going to be something that is reducing the long-term liability instead. So they have to do this worksheet adjustment to make sure that things are showing up correctly for the governmental activities column. So again, we're learning a little bit more about the adjustments that you would have to do here. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 3. Again, reading the last sentence first. How should Pine Ridge County convert the year 4 interest expenditure to the governmental activities column? Let's go up to the top. At the end of year 4, Pine Ridge County paid $40,000 of interest on a 4-year note related to governmental activities. The note required all interest to be paid at maturity. The governmental fund financial statements reported the full $40,000 payment as an interest expenditure in year 4. The interest related evenly to all 4 years, or basically happened evenly across the 4 years. How should Pine Ridge County convert, again, the year 4 interest expenditure to the governmental activities column? So in this situation, is the governmental activities going to be the same as the governmental fund where they record a full $40,000 of interest expense, or will they have been doing it differently throughout this? If you want to give this a guess based on what we've learned so far, pause the video and do that, and when you're ready, come back, we'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is A. They would report $10,000 of interest expense in year 4 because only 1 year of interest applies to the current year. And you probably could have guessed that if you kind of sat there and thought about it, based on what we know about normal interest expense. Let's go through this. Governmental funds generally report interest expenditures when the interest is due and payable. So again, the funds is having it all as an expenditure. Since the full $40,000 was paid at maturity, the governmental fund reported the full amount in year 4. Governmental activities use accrual accounting, so interest expense is reported in the period the interest is incurred. Since the $40,000 relates evenly to the 4 years, only $10,000 applies to year 4. The other $30,000 relates to prior years and would not be reported as current year interest expense in the year 4 governmental activities column, because they technically would have already been reporting $10,000 of interest expense the previous years underneath the governmental activities column, and then governmental funds wasn't recording anything until the $40,000 was due, and then they recorded it all as an expenditure. So that's why we had to make this worksheet adjustment. Now with that, let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 4. How should the internal service fund's remaining balances generally be reported in the government-wide financial statements? Let's go to the top. Brookhaven uses an internal service fund to provide information technology support to city departments. Almost all of the services are provided to departments reported as governmental activities. At year end, the internal service fund has assets of $180,000 and liabilities of $65,000 that are not eliminated in consolidation. So again, how should the internal services fund remaining balances generally be reported in the government financial statements? So this is a little bit different than what we've been looking at so far, a new concept. So if you want to give this a guess, that's great, or if you already know the answer. But if you don't know how this works, because again, this is kind of a newer concept of the ones we've looked at, let's go ahead and look at the answer. All right, here we are at the answer C. It would be reported in the governmental activities or as a governmental activity. Internal service funds are proprietary funds, but they are usually included with governmental activities in the government-wide financial statements when they primarily serve governmental departments. So that's a key thing that you need to know right there. And we're learning a lot about governmental activities in this video, so that's why this relates. We need to know that internal service funds, even though they're proprietary funds, are most likely going to be reported with governmental activities if they have been, primarily serving the government departments. In this case, the internal service fund mainly supports departments reported as governmental activities. Therefore, its remaining assets and liabilities are generally reported in the governmental activities column rather than as business type activities or fiduciary activities. So we learned a little bit more there about how things fit into the governmental activities column. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 5. Let's go through this. Which worksheet entry should Meadow Park City prepare to convert this item to the governmental activities column of the government-wide financial statements? At year-end, Meadow Park City reported $65,000 of property taxes as a deferred inflow of resources in its governmental fund financial statements. The taxes met the accrual basis recognition requirements for the current year, but they were not expected to be collected soon enough to be considered available under modified accrual accounting. So again, what's the worksheet entry going to be to convert this to the governmental activities column in the government-wide financial statements? This is, again, kind of different than what we've looked at before, but it's, following a similar idea. We're trying to understand the difference between governmental funds and governmental activities and how they are reporting things. So think about this, pause the video, think about what we've learned so far to see if you can apply it. If not, that's okay. But again, give it a try. And when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is D. You would debit deferred inflows of resources for $65,000 and credit tax revenue for $65,000. So let's go through this. Governmental funds, as we know from previous videos, use modified accrual accounting. So revenue is recognized only when it is measurable and available. If property taxes meet the accrual basis recognition requirements but are not expected to be collected within the availability period, the governmental fund reports a deferred inflow of resources instead of revenue. Governmental activities use accrual accounting, so the availability criteria or criterion does not prevent recognition. Since this amount was deferred only because it was not available soon enough under modified accrual accounting, the worksheet conversion removes the deferred inflow and records tax revenue. This would be different from taxes levied for a future period, which generally would remain deferred rather than being recognized as a current period revenue. So at the very end there, it's saying that for taxes levied, that would be a different situation. But for the situation that we're talking about, again, underneath the governmental funds, because they use modified accrual accounting, they were having it as a deferred inflow instead of counting it as revenue. But underneath governmental activities, they use accrual accounting. So they aren't as concerned with the availability criteria. They, instead of having it deferred, are going to count it as tax revenue. So that's what we're doing there. We're debiting or getting rid of the inflow of resources and crediting tax revenue instead. So that's the worksheet entry that we had to do there when it comes to, governmental funds compared to governmental activities. Now we've learned quite a bit about how to do the worksheet conversions when it comes to governmental funds to governmental activities. Now, before we do anything else, let's do one more part of the SuperfastCPA process called pillar topics. Now, the idea behind pillar topics is as you're going through the questions, you will notice the things that you keep seeing throughout your review course, throughout the questions. You've seen the same idea or same concept, 2, 3, or 4 times in the questions. And so you know that that is something that you're supposed to know, that you're supposed to learn. So you take it out in your own words and you write it as a pillar topic so that you can reference that and know that, and maybe even make a flashcard out of it to be able to know the key things you were supposed to learn from that topic, from the questions on that topic. So with that said, let's dive into the pillar topics. Okay, here we are at the pillar topics. Let's talk about them. Again, this is basically a summary of what we learned throughout these questions, or maybe a clarification. So let's go through this. Governmental funds use modified accrual accounting and focus on current financial resources. Those were definitely 2 things that we focused on. Governmental activities use accrual accounting and show the broader economic picture because they use the economic resources measurement focus. The worksheet conversion adjusts the governmental funds amounts so they can be reported in the governmental activities column. That's basically what we're doing throughout this whole video, or most of the video was doing these conversions from governmental funds to show up in the governmental activities. When a governmental fund buys a capital asset, it records the purchase as an expenditure. In governmental activities, the asset is recorded as a capital asset and depreciated over time. The worksheet removes the capital outlay expenditure and records the asset and related depreciation. Governmental funds report debt service payments as expenditures, and you'll see that kind of as a theme. The governmental funds just record expenditures for the full amount usually, whereas the governmental activities, which again uses, normal accrual accounting, normal economic resources focus, they are going to be doing it more normally, like having depreciation and things like that. So in governmental activities, the principal portion is not an expense. It reduces the long-term liability, so the worksheet removes the principal payment from expenditures and records the reduction of debt. Governmental funds usually report interest when it is due and payable. Governmental activities report interest expense in the period it is incurred. This means the worksheet may need to adjust interest, so only the amount that belongs to the current period is reported as expense. And then finally, as we learned at the end there, governmental funds may defer revenue if it is not available soon enough. Governmental activities use accrual accounting, so revenue that relates to the current period may be recognized even if it was deferred in the governmental funds. The worksheet removes the deferred inflow and records revenue. So kind of the theme that we've learned throughout this is you need to pay attention to the fact that governmental funds use modified accrual accounting and the focus or the current financial resources focus, compared to governmental activities, which is maybe a little bit more normal, uses the accrual accounting and the economic resources measurement focus. So that's why we have to have this worksheet of conversion from governmental funds to governmental activities, because they record things differently. So we have to have these conversions that we've learned about throughout this video. Now, with that, that is the end of the 5-question YouTube version of this video. Remember, if you purchase the study material for whichever section you're working on, BAR, or you could buy it for all of them, or if you buy the total bundle, you'll get the pro course and all the study materials. But at any rate, if you buy the study materials, you will get access to the 10-question versions of these videos, so that you can get a little bit more help and a little bit more understanding. So if you liked this, make sure you check that out. And one of the easiest ways to learn more about SuperfastCPA and get signed up is by going to SuperfastCPA.com and checking out our free 1-hour webinar training. In that 1 hour, we will teach you, again, for free, the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time. And again, you'll get a much better idea of what SuperfastCPA is, and then you'll be able to more easily decide on if you want to become a pro member or buy the study materials or buy the total bundle. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching or listening. If you liked the video, make sure to like it and leave a comment, and I will see you in the next one.